Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In the last video, we set up a seed file to get some data into our database. We also created an endpoint just to provide a way to create users. In this video, we'll be going over how to write tests for the current functionality, just to make sure we don't break things as we iterate. We'll also be making some structural changes, and I'll be saving my code progression as I go along. So at the moment, we have this create user function that exists in the app.service, and all the endpoints will be essentially created within the app service or the app controller when we set this up, which isn't ideal. You want to split up your endpoints to work with the resources that you have. So you can imagine now that we have this create user, I would want like a user's resource that I can access via /users, for example. In this case, I'm just doing /API to be able to access the resource, which was what I did here, which is not ideal. So ideally, I want something like API users, and then I can make a post and get the data that I want. So we'll be making that change, and also we'll be adding some tests as well. So yeah, a bunch of restructure, and it's going to make things a little bit more structured and maintainable. So first things first, I'm just going to close all of that. So we have a clean slate. So let's go to the docs. So this is the NX docs, and essentially there is a nest generator. So in this case, I can generate a resource. So let's do that. That's what I want. So px, do I have nx installed? Not nz, nx. Yes, I do. So I can just do nxg resource, and then it's going to ask me a bunch of things. So I'm going to actually just specify the name. So I want users. And where do I want it? I want it in apps, general API, source. So I'm just saying the path where it should generate the resource that I'm looking at. So in this case, I want to generate user because we have this create user that I'd like to move over. And I want it to be a REST endpoint or resource. And yes, I want to generate CRUD entry points. And then where do I want to generate it? I want it as provided, which is the URL or the path. There we go. That's all good. It said that it made some changes to PNPM. Let me quickly just check that. Okay, nest map types. Okay, that's all good. And package.json, it likely just installed that, so that's all good. All right, let's take a look at users. That should be somewhere here, if I'm looking at that correctly. Oh, interesting. It didn't generate it in the right place. I'm just gonna get rid of all of that. Let's regenerate that. So it should be source users, I guess. There we go. Try that again. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so now we should have that in the users, which is what we're expecting. There we go. So now I have this database module, which lives in the app.control in the database module. And then I have the app controller, which is essentially calling the create user. So I can move that over. So what I'll do is I'll open the app module, which is here, and then I'll open users module and open those side to side. And what I want to import is the database module, which is already created. And then it's going to complain that it's not imported. Is it? Not yet. There we go. So now that's imported. And then now I can go to users.controller. And you can see it already has the slash. This is going to be /users essentially. And for now, these are all good. I'm just going to ignore them. But I'm going to come over here. And instead of just the user service, I'm also going to do private read only database service. There we go. That's imported. And then in here, if I come over create user, you could see we have this .database.user.create. So that's happening in the service. Actually, at this level, we don't want that here. That's my bad. We want that in the actual service because we don't want to do that kind of logic in the controller. We want that done in the service. So it abstracts away the actual database layer from the controller. So at this point, this is where we actually want, I can just copy this. Okay, grab that, come back here and paste that in. And it's going to complain that I don't have those things set up. So I can grab them, import what I'm looking for. There we go. And that should be good to go. And I'm going to make that async. And we're looking good. Come back here and we're just returning that. So I think I'm happy with that. In this case, we're expecting email to come from, well, we're just hard coding that in, which is not ideal. So what we want is the data should actually just be create user DTO. And it's going to complain because the types don't match up, which is fine. I'm going to make them match up shortly. What I'll do here, this doesn't need to be, I can just return await, and I don't need to await it. I can just return because it doesn't matter. Data. So yeah, we have this issue. The type's not matching up. So I can come here, and what we want is an email and a name set to a string. So this is essentially the DTO we're going to get back from the payload when we make a post request. So that all looks good. I'm going to leave off. There's an extra step here where you can add off the cat. Actually, let's do that now. Why not? I believe it's not installed. So let me just do pnpm install class validator. That's going to install the class validator, which we're going to use to essentially validate that the types we get from the request match up. Otherwise, we throw 400 bad request. So I'm going to import is email from class validator, and I'm going to import is string as well. There we go. And that should be good. Is email, is string, and I can do is not empty as well. There we go. And same thing here. Actually, that's fine. It can be, I could say is optional in this case, because we don't actually need a name to create the user at the moment. Obviously, when we change the schema, that will no longer be the case, but this should be fine. So, okay, we have our types matching up and Prisma is happy, TypeScript is happy, we're good. Awesome. So that means I can move this out of the app. Actually, I might just bin the entire app, but we'll see. So we've got the users good to go. What else do we need? I think that's it. Okay, so at this point, we don't actually need a controller, the service, or anything like that anymore. So I'm going to move the app module to the very top of the source, and I'm going to bin this. Okay, and also we don't need this asset, so I'm just going to remove it. When you run this, you're going to need to, when you delete it, you're going to need to make a change to where it's being referenced in the Webpack, which is here. So I'm just going to delete it. So that's gone. Cool. So we have this, we don't need entities. We're not dealing with entities, and we just have the DTO create an update, and cool. App module is no longer working, obviously, because we've changed the structure. We don't need that. We don't need the database in the app module. What we do need, actually we need imports, and what we're going to import is the users module, because we do need that. Oops. If I can type, there we go. And that should be all we need, actually, to run the app module. Oh, we don't have an index.ts, which is why I'm importing this from the users module directly. So I'm just going to export that, and that should be good. And then we could just do this. Nice and sweet. Cool. And main.ts is going to get the app module from the top level. I think that's looking good. Service, yeah. So let's run till up and just make sure that everything works like before. Okay, so it looks like my Docker is in resource saver mode. I hate when it does that because sometimes that means I need to stop and start it again. So I think I'm going to have to do that now. Okay, so let's try that again. I think that should be good now. All right, cool. We're spinning up. Okay, database is up. Let's see what general API is doing. Cool. And now if I make that same post request, HTTP request, and instead of API, I'm going to do API users, and I'm going to do some name, and I'm going to make that post request 500. Let's see why that's the case. Public user does not exist, and we can fix that by running this. So pnpm db push, pnpm db seed. Okay, and if I make that request one more time, we should have a 200 or 201 in this case. There we go. So you can see we get back the ID, the email, and the name. So we're good on this front. We've moved the app module away, and we just have a users, and the app module is at the very top level. So this is a more sustainable setup. I'm also going to delete these two folders. I think this was when I messed up the resource generation file or the command. Cool. So we've got the test at the top level. We've got this database module, and we've got this users module. So now we can start testing stuff. And I'm just going to close all of that. So we are starting from base. I always like to do that. So now if we run pnpm test, we're likely going to, well, let's see, actually, pnpm test general API. And let's just confirm Okay, we have an error that's likely in the test here. Yep, and we're looking at app module in the wrong place, which is, that should just be app module. There we go. And I'm going to move the terminal to this side actually, so we can see the actual test a little bit easier. Run this again. Okay, so we have 3 failing tests. So I think we should start with the app.spec. Okay, so it looks like we're having an issue with Prisma. So we need to mock the Prisma client within the actual end-to-end test. So we can do this by doing just.mock, and we want to do Prisma client, and we want to mock that. And what we're going to do is just return an object, and within the object, yeah, there you go. We're going to do Prisma client, just.function, mock implementation, and then we're going to pass in the functions we want to mock. In this case, we only need create at this point, so we can just do create, just.function, and that should be fine. So let's try that out. Okay, we're getting a 4 of 4, and that's because we're trying to get, and we should be trying to post. Let's try that, and that should be 201. There we go. And we're passing because we create successfully. Ideally, we should send some data. So this should be this. And then we want to provide the name and email. And let's see. Cool. And let's actually check what the response body looks like. So let's do a to-match snapshot. So let's just confirm that it actually matches the snapshot so we can actually check what's in there. IntelliJ should automatically update with a snapshot. It does not. There it is. Okay, should return 201 in this case. And we're returning nothing because we don't return anything here. Resolved value. And let's just return that. And that should be fine. ID 1. Now, obviously in this case, what we're saying is we're going to mock the Prisma client, and then we're just going to check that the data that we get back is what we sent here, which is, you know, we're basically mocking it. Ideally, we should be creating a test database within the test context, and then we should actually be saving to the database and checking that what we received back is what's currently stored in the database. But for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to mock it like this, and we'll keep it pushing. One iteration I guess we can make on this point is we could do create mock, or mock create, however you want to see it, just.function, and then we could pass that here. Oops. Although now that I think about it, it's likely going to complain to me. Let's see if it does. Okay, no, it's fine. So come here, and what we're going to do is create, and we're going to mock it, and actually we'll just create a user mock, and then do this ID 1, and that way we can just grab that, create user mock, and then do the same thing here, user mock, and that should be fine. Cool. So we're good on the end-to-end part. So let's move on to let's do the controller. Why not? Users.controller.spec. There we go. Okay, so the tests are failing, and that's likely because I'm missing something. So I don't have the database service. So I can put that in here, but that's failing for here. So I can do that here. Database service. Oops. Let's import that. Try that again. Okay, and do the same thing for users.service.spec. But the difference is in this case, I actually don't want to just straight provide that. I want to provide an empty object first. Well, actually, I might want to do a create first. Create just function. And obviously, we just have this test. It should be defined, so it's not really testing anything. So now we can actually test what we wanted to, which is create. And let's do that. So we can say it should call this and expect that to have been called. Ideally, we want to do something like this. Create mock like we did in the end-to-end test. then pass that here. There we go. And then we can do expect this, and let's pass in the email. There we go. And ideally we want to use that. That works. There we go. I think that should do what we're expecting. Cannot read property of undefined reading. Okay, yeah, that's because that should be in user. There we go. Yep, that looks good to me. And we're testing create. Obviously you can add more tests, but this is sufficient for now. We can come over here, do the same thing. But the difference is we're going to do create. Is that what it's called in there? It's called create. Yeah, that's fine. And let's do that. And let's see. Cool. So that's it. We've written tests for the service. Obviously, if you wanted to be a little bit more thorough, you could. But for the sake of this tutorial, we can assume that we have tested the actual API. So if I run pm test general API, we should have our test running. And now we have the functionality working as expected. So if we make any changes moving forward, we'll have errors telling us that we need to fix something, which is great. All right, so at this point, we've got the actual test going. So the next phase is to set up authentication. So at the moment, we've got the schema with the user and posts. Now, obviously with your API, I don't know what your API is going to be, but I'm going to assume that you have users on some level and you're going to have some level of authentication. So what I'm actually going to do in the next video is set up authentication within these actual API. So what we'll have is a JWT form of authentication where the user can log in or sign up for the API, and then they get a token back. And then when they log in, they also get a token that they can store in the cookie. I'm anticipating that the front end will store this. And then whenever we make a request, so if we're using the HTTP client, in this case, I'm using the one from WebStorm. If I wanted to, I could do something like this. So I could say cookie, and I could say JWT cookie or something like that, and pass the cookie that I get back from the API. And every request will then be authenticated. So that's it for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any suggestions for future videos or feedback, I'd love to hear it down below. See you in the next video.